Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Productions channel here at YouTube. Welcome to another album of the week. This, of course, is episode number 54. So, to celebrate its 20th anniversary is, of course, none other than Stiff Upper Lip from AC/DC. I was about to say what album number this is, but at this point, I'm not going to go through that. Anyways, a Stiff Upper Lip, which, again, following, of course, 1995's Ball Breaker, which, of course, that was like 5 years ago prior to this. Where do I completely start? I mean, this isn't really one of AC/DC's, best albums, even though this is a pretty decent album for what this is. However, you're not going to see anybody actually consider this being one of AC/DC's best albums. However, to me, there is a kind of a bit of a nostalgia trip for me. There's a little bit of a nostalgia feel to this album for me, actually. For one, when this album came out, I was already 4 years old, and of course, prior to that, I knew of albums such as Ball Breaker and, of course, Highway to Hell. Those were the two AC/DC albums I actually was pretty much exposed to. I mean, Ball Breaker, when I was born, was the newest album, but it wouldn't be until 4 years late where, in many ways, I would actually at least see anything from AC/DC, actually. Because, again, this, my biggest memory, at least of this time frame of AC/DC, was actually on an episode of Saturday Night Live. And the thing what really also kind of has me, why all of a sudden it has such a big nostalgic memory for me, is that also I remember that Saturday Night Live being the Saturday Night Live that wrestler The Rock had hosted. And of course, I even remember before The Rock introduces AC/DC onto the stage, I remember also wrestlers Triple H and Mick Foley also being in the crowd. So there's a bit of it has that big sort of memory to him. Of course, during this time, I was definitely starting to get more exposed to wrestling, especially the WWF at this time. Of course, this is definitely in the height of WWF's Attitude Era still, or at least during the end, close to the ending of it. But anyways, this, when of course The Rock would then introduce AC/DC, and this was actually, for me, being the first actually seeing at least any, basically any sort of live footage of AC/DC for the very first time, because I didn't really know how much the guys really looked like at this time. I mean, I remember seeing the cover art for Highway to Hell prior to this, but there really wasn't much to really see on the Ball Breaker album, as far as, maybe if you were to, for me, probably look closer and see how Angus Young looked, but this was the first time I even got to see any sort of, any real footage of the band, and of course, them opening up, of course, the newest song, which of course would promote the album, was of course Stiff Upper Lip, which is definitely a fine opener for the album. I mean, it's typical sort of AC/DC boogie from this time. Very similar to some, maybe off of like the Razor's Edge or something. It's kind of got that kind of feel. Very bluesy. Something to it, at least you'd expect from AC/DC at this time, even though it's definitely a pretty good tune. But that was definitely the most biggest memory I really, early on, of AC/DC. But of course, I wouldn't get to see any more sort of early footage until that, the Family Jewels DVD that will come out many years later. Which, of course, I played the fuck out of that DVD, and that really was the DVD that actually really really kind of drove me down that fucking AC/DC rabbit hole, and it just made me a fucking fanatic for years to come, and really kind of really implanted AC/DC as right now still one of my most favorite bands. But let's definitely at least focus on the album, which of course is Stiff Upper Lip. Again, I briefly talked about the opener of it. There's at least a few good songs on this album. I mean, there really isn't a whole lot of, amazing or real big standout songs that probably would be like, this is a favorite or anything. I mean, there's some good songs in there. I definitely have some personal favorites, but none really seem to really go to basically to reach the sort of level of any of the stuff that they did on the albums, any of the Bon Scott era stuff, or at least maybe Back in Black, or For Those About to Rock, or at least maybe Flick of the Switch, or Fly on the Wall, or at least The Razor's Edge. But there is at least some good stuff on here. And before I really get into dive in more to some of the songs, I should also dive in that this would actually also serve as the last AC/DC album to be produced by George Young, who, of course, George Young and the late Harry Vanda were the ones that really produced a lot of those really early AC/DC albums. And the last time the George Young and Harry Vanda actually produced an AC/DC album together was Blow Up Your Video. But this would be the very last one that George Young would produce for AC/DC. Which is kind of crazy, because again, production-wise, this still has a very modern sound. It's not nearly as raw as, let's say, something like the Bon Scott era ones in it, but it doesn't also have that sort of real thin feel of Blow Up Your Video. Very, trebly, but it does have at least a nice sort of bassy, almost a very fuller sound compared to at least Blow Up Your Video. But I don't know if it really has as many of the almost melodic hooks that I think I actually find that I have found to like on Blow Up Your Video, which I think Blow Up Your Video is an underrated AC/DC album. I don't think it really deserves the flack that it gets. I mean, yeah, production-wise, it's not a very well-produced album, but there is a little bit of a charm to it that I actually have come to really like. This one, on the other hand, definitely seems to, in some ways, follow the footsteps of Ball Breaker and The Razor's Edge. Probably kind of goes back to the sort of more melodic, more feel-good feel of The Razor's Edge, but not nearly as heavy as I would say as The Razor's Edge, even though there is a few sort of heaviness to this album, but it's not nearly as dark and brooding as Ball Breaker, which that album in many ways is a very unique sounding AC/DC album. But this one is kind of more like a back to basics sort of, feel-good AC/DC album. It's something really would expect, to something to really throw on for any sort of rock party, basically. Just something to throw on to kind of get the party going. This is the kind of album that it's go. But even in that standard, I don't know if you can say this is probably the more well-put-together AC/DC album as far as really good sort of instant, catchy songs. But there's at least a few good stuff on here that I do like. Again, the title track I like, Meltdown. I also dig House of Jazz. Let me kind of open the CD up here real quick. Satellite Blues I also fucking dig. Come and Get It I also dig as well. That one's got a real sort of almost down and dirty kind of real heavy bluesy feel to it that I dig. That definitely... it's definitely also sounds like something that could have easily been on like The Razor's Edge. It very much has that feel, and it's a great track. All Screwed Up I also fucking dig, and Give It Up is a fine ending track. So there's at least a few good boogie rockers on here. Probably the one song here that I think is probably the biggest, weakest link on the album is for sure. I know many people have pointed out, but it's what is it again? Here it is. Safe in New York City. I mean, besides the otherwise real cool, heavy fucking riff that the song has, the thing that really brings this song down is the fucking lyrics. I mean, it's so hokey. For even for an AC/DC song, this is fucking hokey. I mean, AC/DC definitely has some you know, they definitely do have their lyrics that really kind of pushes it to being pretty hokey. I mean, you got a few songs maybe off of Back in Black. I know you got definitely some songs off of maybe Fly on the Wall or maybe Flick of the Switch or maybe even fucking For Those About to Rock or maybe even Blow Up Your Video that are just kind of hokey. I mean, the one song I can actually think of that really kind of probably gives for me Safe in New York City a little run for its money is probably the song Go Zone off of, was it Goes? Yeah, Go Zone off of Blow Up Your Video, which I think is kind of a weak fucking track off that album. But however, at the same time, for me to say that it gives this song Running Money is a little bit of probably too much of an understatement, because this song really is probably one, it almost pushes to being probably up there as one of the worst AC/DC song, and that's just mostly just the lyrics alone. Because the music itself is a very fine, heavy boogie song that definitely is great, but if it didn't have any of the had anything referenced like Safe in New York City or anything, this probably would have been a pretty good song if they just called it something else, because it's one of the things that really brings that song down. If anything, I would have to me what really would kind of save the sound even more if they had taken off Safe in New York City and replaced it with the song Cyberspace, which was actually added as a bonus track to a lot of the Australian tour editions for the sound. I don't know about Japanese editions, because it's kind of very rare to actually come across a Japanese edition of the sound that's got a different song that isn't on any of the regular editions. It seemed like AC/DC wasn't the band that really did all of that, unless you go back to the AC/DC live album. For example. Anyways, that I would have really would have replaced Safe in New York City with Cyberspace, because Cyberspace is a much more better track. It's definitely classic boogie AC/DC, and even though the lyrics is kind of close to being a little hokey at times, but it's not nearly as fucking dumb as Safe in New York City. I mean, this is of course. This album was released on the February 28th, actually. I know Wikipedia, when you look into the discography section, they apparently seem to list the 25th, but when you do press on to the link, it then gives out the 20th. I mean, you go on to Discogs, it even gives out that date. I've looked to see if the 25th was the Australian date, but I can't seem to find anything that would back that claim up, so I don't know where the 25th it came into play. I don't know where Wikipedia got that. If anybody can tell me, or at least can somewhat correct me on the 25th, then feel free to. But still, the sound what was released on February 28th, 2000, just a year before the whole fucking 9/11 incident. So I guess in a way, they didn't really know what would happen in the future. Still, though, I think it's still a pretty dumb fucking track for at least the lyrics, because again, musically, like I've stated, it's actually got a real good heavy boogie riff to it. It's just the lyrics fucking ruin the track in many ways, but I would have replaced it with Cyberspace, which is definitely a pretty fucking good track. Anyways, though, overall, this is definitely I would say is a good AC/DC album. Definitely, though, not nearly as, up there as probably the most memorable or some of the best, or an album that definitely reaches the level of classic album status, like Ball, some like, Back in Black, or any of the Bon Scott era albums, or for me, Flick of the Switch, or Fly on the Wall, or The Razor's Edge. It doesn't really reach that fucking status, but it doesn't mean that this is a bad album. This is still a very fine AC/DC album, and is enough, at least when you throw it on, you at least get a bit of, that real good time feel, boogie feel that definitely lifts you up, and it does what it has to do. But I mean, there's still at least a good diamond in the roughs on this album, but none, I would say, that are just, exceptional. It's definitely a good album that pleases AC/DC fans, and it's definitely a fine album. So with that, this definitely, again, great. 20 years old, man. Just great that this album had reached its 20th anniversary. I know this year, Back in Black is going to reach its 40th anniversary, and the Razor's Edge will be pushing on to its 30th anniversary. So with that, definitely leave your if you have any thoughts of this album, leave those comments down in the comment section below. I hope you all enjoyed this Every Thrash. I say I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.